Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Again, thank you so much for inviting us to this important conversation coming from the community organization. And a few of my team members are at the back there. I want to shout out to them for coming with me and supporting me here. So on behalf of Midyata Community Services, I would like to acknowledge that for thousands of years, the land of Toronto, where we came from, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat people, and most recently, the Mississauga of Credit. Today, this meeting is taking place here. We are still home to many indigenous, including a diverse population of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. We'd like also to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so we honor and give tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land, and we express our appreciation to indigenous people who have come before us and all those who are leading us into this brighter future. So in my presentation, I'm just going to touch on the following agenda item. I'll talk a little bit about my organization, Midyata Community Services, exploring security policy changes in Canada post 9/11, criminalization of Black and Muslim bodies, discrimination in the school system, the school to prison pipeline, punitive action against Black youth, youth radicalization, community perspectives as service providers, and a few of the recommendations that just came out from some of the our community members that we talked to. So Midyata Community Services. So we are a nonprofit charitable organization that provides settlement services and other programs that advance education by providing course seminars and support services for refugees and immigrants. Actually, we started as a Somali association of community organization, and then we changed our name to Midyata Community Services. And when we originally started this organization is when we saw a lot of numbers of Somalis coming from the war-torn country into Canada and needed a lot of support during their journey. So we were established in 1993 as a family reunification. So the focus was around reuniting them with their families because a lot of women came into the country with kids leaving men behind. And we were incorporated as a nonprofit organization in 1995. Of course, we believe in the value and provision of high quality community social services, and we promote and build a better and prosperity society. Sorry. So when we talk about the implication of Canadian government security bills and how it affected a lot of the community members that we're serving currently, which is the Somali community. 1 second, my computer just turned off. No, this one, not here. So the Somali diaspora is racially and religiously profiled within the context of national security regarding to their Muslim background as well as criminal law for their African Black background. And we talk about this because when we see, when the Somali communities were coming into the country, as we said, there was a bill C-86, which was introduced in 1993, which brought drastic change to immigration in Canada. In particular, it greatly affected convention refugees from Somalia and Afghanistan due to the new requirements to have a valid passport or identification documents in order to be granted permanent residence. And a lot of the Somali communities, when they were running away from the war-torn country, they came into Canada without any identification documents. So this placed them in a limbo, like while waiting for their status and not moving forward. This new bill became a huge barrier for the refugee claimants from Somalia because the country was at war and did not have any government to issue passport or any other identification document. Instead of the government of Canada smoothing integration of the Somali communities and affording them the opportunities, the bill required them to wait 5 years, as mentioned. Furthermore, after that, in 2006, Bill C-43 was introduced. It amended the Immigration and Refugee Act in a way that negatively affected the Somali community in attaining, again, permanent residence. This bill enactment amends the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to limit the review mechanism for certain foreign nationals or permanent residents who are inadmissible on such grounds as serious criminality. It also amended the act to provide for the denial of temporary residence status to foreign nationals based on public policy. And we notice also after 9/11, Canada passed the Anti-Racism Act of 2001 to develop the legislative ability to pursue terrorism charges within the subsequent passing of the Public Safety Act. And unfortunately, I was traveling in 2001, so I would say that I was a product of 9/11 because the same time I was supposed to travel, there was 9/11 happened. So my family were really scared that because of course, I'm wearing hijab, I'm Black. So they really requested me not to travel with my hijab, which is against my own will. But I had to really agree with my father because he was so worried, and I had to remove my hijab in order to travel to Canada, which was unfortunate. And it's something that I do regret up to this day. But I had to do that because of my parents and to ensure my safety because of them. Again, in 2002, we noticed that there was an additional intelligence gathering information sharing provision were adopted as part of national security policy, which focused on transnational terrorism. There was a security certificate, a tool of immigration law, were utilized to detain permanent residents and foreign nationals posing as national security. Again, in 2015 federal election campaign, we noticed Stephen Harper stroking fears in the voting public against Canadian Muslims by making the wearing of niqab during citizenship ceremony and jihadism as an electoral issue. So there was a number of issues that we really faced as immigrants, Somalis, with targeted bills over our heads. Criminalization of Black and Muslim bodies. After 9/11, Muslims have been preemptively labeled as threats to national security, as a lot of panelists were talking yesterday and today as well. Media representation of Muslim and Black bodies consistently present them in a negative light with an emphasis on the oppression of women, violence, and extremism. Similarly, we know in FARA 2011, he identified issues of racism, stereotyping, racial profiling, and criminalization of Somali male within the school system. So Black students were labeled as hyper-aggressive, resulting in them receiving severe punishment, as well as the teachers distancing themselves from the students and creating hostile learning environment for students. Unfortunately, many students, Somali Canadians who were born and raised here, are facing similar struggles and feel like they can only turn to community agency for support. And we noticed that even in 2013, the creation of Somali Liaison Unit. So the Somali Liaison Unit was created because of Project Travel, which was an incident that happened in one of the areas in Toronto, Rexdale area, where they were targeting gang members within that area. And they just broke a lot of, like they broke out into the community, and a lot of Somali members were living in that neighborhood. And due to the Project Travel, they created this Somali Liaison Unit Police, which was targeted to the Somali community. Also the creation of task force, Toronto District School Board task force, reflecting the stigmatization of Somali students with the creation of this particular task force in 2022 to address performance concerns regarding students of Somali descent, which further stigmatize the community as we speak to. So the overrepresentation of young Black, Indigenous, and people of color within the juvenile justice system in Canada, a large examination about the treatment of minority youth by police organization and members within the juvenile and criminal justice system, significantly cause of this overrepresentation in systemic discrimination and racism embedded within the Canadian institutions. And we see this through a lot of work that we are doing in our organization with the youth justice program that we have currently in hand. We have example of a lot of youth who are criminalized within the school system. Like the school calls the police right away whenever there's an incident, minor incident, and the youth is criminalized from the time they're in school. By the time they leave, they cannot get any jobs, they cannot support. We have an incident where we had a newcomer who came into the country. He was new, he couldn't speak the language. He was deemed violent, he was deemed aggressive, he was kicked out of school. He went to a shelter, was kicked out of the shelter because he was fighting, because he had a lot of trauma, but this was not, they were not supported him. Instead, they kicked him out in all the places. He came through our doors and we realized that he needed a lot of support because of the trauma that he had from the war-torn country and moving from one country to another. So those are just few examples that we see with a lot of our Black students who are being discriminated within the school system. So many Somali students have challenges when adapting a new environment with no support and low expectation from teachers. The school system is rooted in systemic discrimination targeting Somali students from low-income households and students with specific education. Somali and Muslim students were further marginalized, stigmatized, and segregated. School use deficit-informed research, which sees students from communities of color as depressive, and it is the parents' fault for students having poor academic performance. So the parents are blamed, which is a form of contemporary racism. Weaponizing children's aid society to instill fear in parents and students. And we know that school use punitive action against students through CRS when CRS gets involved, and eventually we notice a lot of the youth who are going through the Children's Aid Society also end up resulting into the youth justice system. School to prison pipeline. Black students were generally viewed as aggressors or guilt, thus receiving more suspension or expulsion than their white peers. And police in school, we saw a lot of by introducing that, it created a lot of criminalization and policing around school. Black students are labeled as hyper-aggressive, resulting in them receiving severe punishment, as well as the teachers distancing themselves from the students and creating a hostile learning environment for students. And when students begin to become aware of system discrimination, they start to disengage, distance themselves from learning. Again, here we heard a 4-year-old who was like, the sister used to be a niqabi. Niqabi is the first covering, and they noticed a lot of racism and discrimination in school, but they didn't take any action. So there was an incident that just recently happened with a student and a family advocate that was brought to attention. When the sister went to deliver lunch to the 4-year-old student, there was a lot of comments that was made by the teacher, unfortunately, which resulted, like, because they had a lunch bag, I don't know, maybe the lunch bag wasn't beautiful enough, I would say that, because she kind of said that you should have even purchased one from the dollar store. So the unfortunate part is the boy went missing for the day, couple of hours. And one of a stranger just who resides within the school brought the boy back. The family was not informed for 3 days. The school never notified the family. And right now we are supporting the family as well as involving few lawyers to work through this with the family, because the youth apparently is so traumatized. He's also peeing in bed, and he's showed a lot of signs of trauma. So we don't know what happened, but there's a lot of fear instilled in him because of the experience that he received in school. Youth radicalization. We've seen a lot of our youth being radicalized in different spaces because of being marginalized from the Western society that they're living in. They experience a lot of identity crisis, lack of belonging within society, discrimination and racism within society pushes a lot of our youth to look for spaces where they can belong, like religious spaces, or because of their vulnerability, they are used in different ways. Some youth even find groups online who have experienced similar problems that they can relate to. So inequality produces radicalization, but the focus on radicalization also produces inequality through injustice, discrimination. And I know my time is up, so I'm gonna rush through this. So community perspective as service providers, school are major turning points for youth. So proper supporting is needed for youth and staff in school, because we notice a lot of issues stemming from the school. So teachers, caseworkers, we notice social workers supporting maybe 5 schools. One social worker is put to support 5 schools. So we think this needs to change. Many cases we have seen have started from the school system. So professionals must work across sectors, like from health, justice, to address factors and the unfairness that targets Muslim and Black youth. And just a few of the recommendations, just quickly, before I can end here, is we feel like targeted policies and regulations are very important. And this must be created to change regulations and programs to undo the damage that was done from the policies that has been targeted towards our community. We need to hold the media accountable for negative portraying of Muslim and Black people. And also we feel like cultural relevant and respective pedagogy, very important. Professional learning on racial stereotype and profiling across cultural differences, accommodating people with disability, and understanding the unique Muslim and Black experience, very important again. And parental engagement of Somali parents in matter pertaining to their children, because we notice school never involve parents and so many other institutions at the same time. And we feel like having police in school is further criminalizing the Muslim and Black youth. Thank you.